네, 방금 소개받은 그 허수입니다. 저는 서울대학교 국사과에서 한국 근대사를 공부하고 가르치고 있습니다. 저는 이제 디지털 인문학 중에서도 텍스트 마이닝, 토픽 모델링을 통해서 한국 근대사 자료를 분석하는 일을 하고 있는데요. 그래서 오늘 네 분이죠. 그 발표에 대해서 아주 전문적인 토론을 하기는 어렵지만 좀 일반적인 차원에서 토론자로서의 의무를 다하고자 합니다. 많은 것을 배웠고요. 순서대로 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 첫 번째 박종훈 사라 아일프슨 교수님의 발표에 대한 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 이 발표는 두 가지 면에서 좀 저는 인상 깊게 들었는데요. 이 기존의 번역본이 통계적으로 유의한 차이가 보이는가라는 소극적인 접근을 넘어서 번역본이 실질적으로 동등한가 하는 적극적인 연구 질문을 설정한 점이 주목됩니다. 두 번째는 이 LIWC, BERT 등 세 가지 상이한 분석 도구를 활용해서 명시적인 이 의휘, 주제적 의미 영역 등 다층적 차원에서 분석을 수행한 점이 견고한 어떤 그런 연구라는 생각이 들었습니다. 연구 결과 해석에 관한 질문을 두 가지 드리겠는데요. 첫 번째는 분석 기준의 사후 조정에 대한 부분입니다. 선생님들께서 플러스 마이너스 0.10이라는 엄격한 동등성 기준을 사전에 설정하셨는데요. 그런데 이 LIWC BERT 분석에서 라우트 번역본이 이 기준을 충족하지 못할 때 민감도 분석이라는 이름 하에서 기준을 플러스 마이너스 0.15로 완화해서 모든 번역본이 동등하다는 결론을 도출하셨습니다. 사전 설정된 여기에 관한 질문인데요. 사전 설정된 엄격한 기준을 충족하지 못한 결과를 오히려 번역가 정체성에 유의미한 영향을 보여주는 중요한 발견으로 해석할 가능성은 없는지 궁금합니다. 기존 완화를 통한 결론 도출보다는 이러한 예외가 번역 연구에서 가장 문학적으로 의미 있는 핵심 발견일 수 있다는 생각도 들었습니다. 이에 관한 선생님의 그 의견을 듣고 싶고요. 두 번째는 분석 범위의 제한성입니다. 본 연구는 소설의 서술 부분을 제외하고 대화와 내면 사고만을 분석 대상으로 하셨는데요. 제가 잘은 모르겠습니다만은 그 트라우마와 같은 복합적 정서는 종종 서술자의 의도, 분위기 설정, 의도적 침묵 등을 통해 더욱 강력하게 전달되는 경우가 있지 않을까 생각을 해서 이 질문은요. 번역가의 해석적 개입이 가장 현저하게 나타날 수 있는 서술 부분을 배제함으로써 결과적으로 번역본 간의 안정성을 과대평가할 이유는 없는지 여쭙고 싶습니다. 두 번째는 김병준 선생님 발표에 대한 논평입니다. 선생님의 발표는 이 한국문학 연구의 통합적인 지형도를 제시한 점이 좀 인상적입니다. 국내 한국문학, 글로벌 한국문학, 국내 영문학 연구 이 영역을 통합적으로 분석을 해서 한국문학의 국내외 수용과 발전 과정을 입체적으로 조명하신 거요. 그래서 노벨 문학상 수상이 개인이 아니라 학술장의 복합적 발전 과정으로 보신 것이 설득력이 있고요. 두 번째는 디지털 인문학 반분을 효과적으로 활용해서 시멘틱 네트워크 분석과 스트럭처럴 토픽 모델링을 통해서 정량적인 변화를 살펴보신 부분이 인상적인데요. 추가 논의가 필요한 지점이라고 생각되는 두 가지만 말씀드리면, 첫 번째, 발표에서 다루신 국내 한국문학, 글로벌 한국문학, 국내 영문학이라는 세 영역을 선정한 구체적인 이론적 방법론적 근거가 무엇인지 궁금합니다. 물론 이제 노벨 문학상 수상의 배경이랄까 요인들을 보신다는 것은 이해하는데 조금 더 구체적인 연결고리가 있으면 좋겠고요. 두 번째는 사회적 역동성 개념에 관한 건데요. 이 소셜 다이나믹스라는 것이 본 연구 맥락에서 어떻게 정의하고 계신지 이것도 좀 궁금합니다. 그다음에 세 번째, 레프 마노비치 선생님 발표에 대한 질문인데요. 세 가지입니다. 첫 번째, 교수님의 초기 연구에서 탁월하게 구분하신 내러티브 논리와 데이터베이스 논리 사이의 근본적인 차이를 고려할 때 문화 분석이라는 실천은 문화 연구의 데이터베이스 논리를 적용한 것으로 이해가 됩니다. 교수님께서 제시하신 12가지 연구 과제에서 언급된 지속적인 긴장, 즉 대규모 데이터베이스적인 패턴 발견과 개별 문화 작품의 고유한 내러티브적 통합성 보존 사이의 긴장을 현재는 어떻게 해결해 나가고 계신지 궁금합니다. 두 번째는 선생님께서 그 발표문 뒷부분에 네 번째 큰 아이디어에서 제안하신 범주 없이 문화를 관찰한다는 급진적 가능성은 이미지 플롯 등의 도구에서 훌륭히 구현되고 있다고 봅니다. 그런데 잠재 공간에 고차원적 범주 체계를 구축하여 작동하는 생성형 AI 시대에 이러한 범주 없는 분석이라는 이상이 여전히 유효한지, 아니면 이제 AI가 문화에 부과하는 새롭고 불투명한 범주들에 대한 비판적 분석에 더 집중해야 하는지에 대한 교수님의 견해를 듣고 싶습니다. 마지막 세 번째입니다. 교수님께서 12번째 연구 과제인 맨 마지막에 환원의 문제, 그 리덕션이라고 하셨죠. 이것과 독창성 상실을 고려할 때 모든 시각 문화를 재조립을 위한 통계 모델로 환원하는 생성형 AI가 이러한 과정의 정점에 있는 것처럼 보입니다. 이론가이자 예술가로서 이러한 도구들과 작업하고 계신 선생님, 교수님께서 보시기에 AI가 필연적으로 양식적 평균으로의 회귀를 야기할 것인지, 아니면 진정한 새로움을 창출하고 문화적 다양성을 확장하는 도구가 될 가능성이 있는지에 대한 견해를 공유해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 이거는 뭐 이 세 분에 대한 제 논평은 그냥 코멘트라기보다는 제가 잘 모르는 분야에 대한 질문이라고 봐주시고 좋은 말씀을 좀 부탁드리겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Okay, hard to follow up with this. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to discuss these three fascinating presentations. And I do have to admit, I am a historian of early modern East Asia, China, and I actually abandoned English language and literature as my undergraduate major. So in other words, it's a little bit ironic that my past has come to haunt me, like, Wani, do the kind of literature and stuff. So I guess that's how life goes on. I have a kind of overall comment about the panel, which I think, and I'm curious whether this was intended or not, but I think the fascinating thing about this panel was that it started with something very small, 3 translations. Then we went on to a kind of broad picture of Korean literature studies, and then we ended with a much more broader concept of culture and things like that. So I don't know whether it was designed by coincidence, but the 3 methodologies kind of expanding the scope shows both the kind of breadth and versatility of what we can do with these digital humanities methods. But at the same time, I also think there's a sense of continuity. So like the traditional methods of the humanity insight, or the same questions that we go on and on are also increasingly repeated in all of the 3 papers. So with that, I do want to thank all the presenters and the organizers. Again, I think I am similar with Professor Hall in the sense that I'm asking most of these questions out of curiosity. To keep things short, yes, I'll do it very shortly. So for the first presentation, the thing that I wanted to ask is about, basically, I think it's fascinating that you bring into the account of the status, being veteran or not, or female or the gender, the female not being a kind of starting point for research. And if somebody forced me to do that, I don't think that's going to happen. But if that happened to me, I would think that would be a very logical place to start that research. With that said, I wonder if there's anything, previous studies that have kind of addressed this question, right? Has actually the kind of translator status, gender or profession actually had an impact on these studies? And I think that if you could answer that question, you'll bring a little bit more insight in showing how, as you kind of think how the expectations of those having a factor didn't actually play out that much. So that was the question that I wanted to ask to the first presentations. Second to Professor Kim and Professor Kim. Well, actually, since I'm speaking in English, Byung-Jun and Young-Soo, yes, I finally did it. I think your conclusion compellingly demonstrates some of the kind of intuition that we had. So yes, global Korean studies will have a more kind of contemporary aspect, and the gender of the Korean studies, people will have some kind of different approaches. And I do agree with that, but I did want to kind of bring up the question of gender, and I think you kind of answered it to some degree. So it wasn't clear in the kind of pre-circulated materials, but you did say that recognizing the gender of the different authors was something you could only find in the Korean database sources. But I still wonder if the gender and feminist thing is only restricted to that. So does gender actually play another role or different roles in other researches? I think that would be something that we'll be all be interested on. Professor Levmanovich, I really don't know if I'm supposed to be doing a kind of commentary on this. I feel a little bit overwhelmed. But one thing that I was curious, and this is mostly related to methodology, is at least based on my limited experience, like when digital humanities, again, the kind of traditional one where we kind of focus on text, we are very much concerned about the kind of copyright issues and that kind of thing. And as someone who's very much ignorant in this field, I wonder how these kind of large-scale cultural analytics deal with the issue of copyrights, scraping data, and what kind of challenges, implications. And I hope that this question helps the students who might want to dive into this field, think about how they deal with this kind of copyrights and that kind of stuff. So those are the three questions that I had. Thank you very much, and that concludes at least my limited commentaries. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for the wonderful questions and comments. And we have three questions, two from Sue and one from Won-hee. And I'm going to answer the first question, and the other two questions will be answered by my colleague, Sarah. The first question was about the equivalence band. So we adjusted the number. We actually fixed the number at plus minus 0.1. That's arbitrary, just like 0.05 in statistics, right? So that part, yes, that was not real question. His question was, we extended it to 0.15 to see the sensitivity. At that level, every text was equal. So is there any chance for us to miss? I mean, we have missed something really meaningful and small. Yes, there is. So I completely agree with you, and your comments are valuable. So unfortunately, I had to skip the limitations part. I mentioned that part in my limitations. So we can go either way. Yes, there is a really small difference. Then let's take a look at, take a closer look at those things. What kind of small differences are they? But I'm just showing, we just showed two possibilities. One is totally equal, I mean, largely equal. The other possibility is, yes, if we just fix it at 0.1, then, yeah, there are really small and meaningful differences. Number two.
Yes, terrific questions. Thank you. So this is in response to, was our focus on veteran thought and speech possibly missing elements of tone, atmosphere, or intentional silence? And my answer would perhaps be no, yes, and maybe. So one thing to consider is, and I'm arguing that this novel is a modernist novel. It is not just a coming-of-age story, simplistic tale, here's our beginning, middle, and end as this young person arrives to manhood. I shared with you the epigraph, which is a comment on what the novel is attempting to do. What I didn't share with you was the last page. It is also metatextual. So you have this novel about his service. At the end of his story, there is a large gap, and at the very bottom of the last page, the novel is now written in the third person, as if someone else is writing his story. We learn in the novel that Paul is an aspiring author. He would like to write a play, he would like to write books. So it is this highly constructed text that ends with this note that suggests this is even more constructed than you imagine. So one reason why we chose to focus on veteran thought and speech was that we believed it would grant greater access to the interiority of the veteran experience, closer to the truth of their experience. So maybe that's my yes. I have more, yes. However, we also think that that is an excellent question, and the next phase of this project would be to explore the full texts of all three, actually I should say four, now that Kurt Beals has released his translation. The Beals edition came out after our proposal and before our talk today, so that is a future step. And maybe my maybe is the novel was translated immediately into 23 languages. There's also the original German language to consider. Shall I do the... Excellent. Yes. Wonderful. To the last question about veteran status or gender, I'll share that in a past life. I worked for the National Veterans Art Museum in Chicago, Illinois. It was previously the National Vietnam Veterans Art Museum. And one of the key distinctions is you needed to have your DD-214, your discharge paperwork. You needed to be a veteran. One of the big moves that those veterans made was to include women artists in the conversation more intentionally. So am I convinced that there is a distinction in the gender? No, absolutely not. But I think that part of the discourse of war, and your War and Women Human Rights Museum here in Seoul was such an inspiring space, strikes me that there may be more work to do here. Yes, and you saw on our slides in his private correspondence, it's in the archives in the Australian National Library, Arthur Wesley Ween took a diary note that said, I was chosen by virtue of my experience, by virtue of having been a World War I veteran, not because I was a particularly good translator. And in fact, Brian Murdoch in 1993, when he did his translation, said, this is not a very good translation, but his veteran status carried the day.
네, 두 번째 발표를 맡은 김병준입니다. 그 허수 교수님께서 여쭤보신 두 가지 질문인데요. 첫 번째 질문은 결국 이제 데이터 셀렉션의 문제입니다. 그래서 데이터 셋을 어떤 데이터셋을 선택하고 그게 한국문학 연구와 뭐 해외 한국문학 연구와 어떻게 연계되는데 그거를 대표적으로 어떤 데이터를 쓸 것이냐의 문제라고 저는 이해를 했는데요. 데이터 필터링 과정에서 이제 국어국문학과는 이제 기본적으로 3분과 체제로 있어요. 그래서 현대문학, 컨템퍼러리 리터러처, 현대문학 연구, 그리고 고전문학, 그리고 국어학, 어학 연구가 있는데 이 데이터를 필터링하는 과정에서 현대문학 연구만 따로 제가 손으로 다 연구자들과 같이 해서 그걸 뽑아냈습니다. 그래서 아무래도 그런 식으로 대표성을 하기도 그 뽑는 과정에서 데이터 필터링을 거치기도 했고요. 물론 이제 그 문학장에서 그 이른바 비평, 크리티컬 하는 그 텍스트는 논문만 있는 것은 아닙니다. 당연히 현장 비평이라 그래서 뭐 매거진에서 나오는 다양한 문학 비평들이 있을 텐데 그런 텍스트도 사실 같이 들어가면 굉장히 좋을 것 같고 또 그 예를 들면 한국 문학 연구를 꼭 그 국어국문학과에서만 하는 건 아니잖아요. 그래서 뭐 사회학이나 뭐 정치학이나 심지어 정치학, 사회과학에서도 당연히 그런 문학 연구를 할 수 있을 텐데 그래서 향후 어떤 한국의 그 인문학, 사회과학 전체 분야에서의 그런 이런 한국 문학에 대한 연구로 나중에는 좀 확장을 하고 싶은 마음이 당연히 있고요. 지금 현재는 데이터를 그런 식으로 좀 선택을 해서 필터링을 했고 그걸로 가지고 이제 처리를 했던 어떻게 보면 한계일 수도 있고 그런 데이터의 성격을 가지고 있고요. 두 번째는 소셜 다이나믹스를 우리가 어떻게 측정할 수 있냐, 매저할 수 있냐. 그 점은 사실 이 연구의 약점이기도 하고 아직 더 드러나지 않은 것인데 예를 들면 지금 연구팀에서는 이런 가정을 가지고 있어요. 뭐 한국 그 문학 연구 논문에서 해외 다른 연구를 인용한다거나 아니면 어떤 해외 이론을 띠어를 가져와서 어떻게 쓰는지 그런 텍스트를 가져오는 인용 관계 분석 같은 것도 해볼 수 있을 것 같고 혹은 국내 한국 내에서 영어 영문학자들이 쓴 논문을 한국 문학 연구자들이 또 인용할 수도 있잖아요. 서로의 인용 관계 같은 것들을 가지고 와서 거기 안에서의 소셜 다이나믹스를 보고 싶은 게 일단 추후에 할 연구이기도 하고 그 지도 학생들이랑 같이 잘 진행을 해보겠습니다. 네, 그래서 그 두 가지 질문이 있었고 또 이제 조은희 교수님 여쭤보신 거는 그 젠더의 그런 질문이 있었는데 사실 발표 때 좀 어느 정도 해결이 되긴 했어요. 그래서 젠더 요소 분석이 왜 한국문학 연구에만 국한돼 있냐 그건 사실은 데이터 어베일러빌리티 때문입니다. 그래서 데이터를 지금 영어 영문학 쪽 데이터를 제가 다 수집을 못했고 그래서 연구자 젠더 정보를 가지고 당연히 그걸 확장해서 할 예정입니다. 다만 젠더가 모든 요소를 다 연구 경향을 그걸 다 결정하진 않겠죠, 당연히. 예를 들면 30대 여성 연구자와 50대 여성 연구자는 당연히 서로 연구 경향이 다를 것입니다. 그래서 그런 나이 요소 같은 것도 저희가 지금 다 데이터가 준비되어 있거든요. 그래서 뭐 예를 들면 나이의 그 연구자의 당시 논문에 쓴 그 성별과 그리고 그 세대, 그 당시의 그 나이에 따라서 어떤 연구 경향의 영향이 있는지, 상관관계가 있는지도 추후에 같이 고려해서 연구를 해보고자 합니다. 네, 이상입니다.
Okay, well, we due for coffee break in a few minutes, so I'll try to be short. But I will address two questions. First of all, easy question about copyright. So basically, I'm a visual artist who uses university his platform, right? Because I prefer university people intelligent, educated, very nice, as opposed to art world full of some random, people, right? But I can bring this artistic, mobile approach to my research. So when we started doing our projects in 2009, we never cared about copyright. We would just download whatever data we wanted. And this is what allowed us to move very fast and in a way create these kind of methods and create like thousands of visualizations in a few years. And we never had any problem. The problem came later when we kind of published few of our studies in some kind of like academic peer-reviewed journals. In some cases it was okay. But in some cases, we said, no, we can't publish this visualization of, let's say, 50,000 Instagram images. If you want to publish it, you have to go to each author and ask for a permission, even though each image was like 1 pixel. So I said, okay, well, don't publish it. So now the second question, which is more difficult, about reduction, right? So I was kind of claiming that both cultural analytics and digital humanities on the one hand, and generative AI share this Achilles heel of like reduction, because they're both based on statistics and machine learning. So here's the interesting twist, right? In the 20th century, there was this very standard idea that you can't fully describe images or film, right, or music with words, right? So as a semiotic system, words are more limiting. And in fact, this idea was my inspiration for cultural analytics, because I said, I'm very frustrated by history, which tries to describe paintings or sculptures, and words just not able to differentiate some kind of very fine, subtle differences. So instead, I'm going to kind of extract features and measure things like brightness, saturation, texture, symmetry, composition. And since I can measure this quantitatively, it will give me like a much better language to talk about non-linguistic culture. And this is kind of true. But here's what happened, right? When generative AI, right, started to develop, and specifically kind of the network models to generate images using text prompts, at first, when you think about it, it looks terrible, right? Because you basically take images from the web. The images have this kind of short descriptions, right, in the HTML code, and then you basically train, right, you basically create this joint latent space, right, where this image, where words are correlated or connected to kind of words or phrases connected to images, right, which we describe. So when you think about it, you said this is terrible, and the results are going to be terrible, but the results are actually amazing, right? Because what I learned in the last 3 years. If you write very short prompt, yes, you will get something generic. But if you prompt like a paragraph, and if you use the right language, the system can create images in tens of thousands of styles with very particular moods, etc., etc. So in a way, right, it kind of contradicts our common sense. And it's kind of would be interesting to analyze why it works. I think partly it works because like this linguistic kind of descriptions. Right? You don't just say color this or composition this. You say, well, I want the image which is like a bit surrealistic and the mood is a bit contemplative. So you're actually using this kind of higher level, right, almost abstract kind of quantifiers. And because there are plenty of examples of the stuff, right, on the web, and the neural networks can interpolate, right, between these examples, it actually works. So what I learned, right, by using generative AI is that I was wrong about language, but language is actually a much richer system for describing images than I ever thought. And that's, I think, interesting, kind of unexpected result.
Any other question? Yeah. Thank you for taking our time. Okay, we have a few minutes to the coffee break. So if you have any question of the audience, please feel free to raise. Yeah. 그 마이크 좀 전해주시겠어요?
My question goes to Professor Lev Manovich. I found your description of kind of visualizing the dynamic visuals, such as user interaction and kind of social media, interaction on social media, very fascinating. But it's hard to, at the same time, hard to wrap my head around. Could you describe what type of features, for instance, would go in a visualization like that?
Well, sorry. Well, yeah, I will be like. Okay. Well, thanks for your question. So so this is right. I declared this as one of my challenges, but we actually ourselves did very, very little work around it. I mean, we did creative visualizations, few visualizations of video games, where we basically recorded, right, kind of recorded, members of our lab, right, kind of playing, video game, let's say 40 hours, 80 hours, and then as the person was kind of playing video game, like we put a software where it was capturing the screen, right, every few seconds, and then I didn't put it in my presentation, and then we kind of used the same methods to visualize it, so you basically get like 40,000 or 80,000. Or 400,000, like frames, right, arranged in this array, so you kind of see like the person kind of playing video game. But I think, but that was just one attempt. I think more generally, right, the field, which is actually focusing on analyzing interactions, is human-computer interaction, HCI, and also people do it like game companies do it, right? So game companies, we have like special, parts where people are playing games, and then we're recording the play, and we're saying, okay, here, this part is very difficult, right? Lots of people fail, so we're going to make it easier. So I think the industry seems to be kind of more ahead in figuring out ways to analyze, visualize, and use some kind of descriptions, right, of interactive culture, right? So I think it remains a very interesting challenge for us, and I think you can apply it even like to text, right? Because it's supposed to visualize, it's supposed to analyzing features in text. Maybe we can analyze instead, or in addition, like the individual process of individual readings of text, right? How do different readers read text, right? I mean, you can record eye movements, etc. I mean, you can basically devise systems to do that, right? So that's one idea which kind of comes to mind, right? Again, not analyzing the cultural artifact as it is, right? But analyzing kind of a process of reception, interaction with this artifact.
Okay. I think we have time for just one more question. Yeah. We have 5 minutes.
Okay, wow, that's a lot of time. Yeah. A question for Sarah and Chongwon. I checked your the BERT model you used, and I was wondering because the training data came from Reddit, and one of the things you brought up toward the end of your presentation is you want to develop a model that that is able to tell language from early 20th century. Have you started working on this, and have you been in conversation with other scholars? I know the Ted Underwood's team has been working on a language model that, say, only understands 19th century French or 18th century English. Have you considered training something like this that is custom made for your specific research purposes?
Answer the question? Okay, that would be really ideal. So once again, that's one of our weaknesses too. The difference, the time span is dramatically different, right? So Go Emotions, yes, was trained based on really modern, right? Contemporary English, but we are dealing with the 1920s literature text. Then how can we have that kind of model based on 1920s text? Okay. As far as I know, there's nothing like that. So we might consider developing maybe similar models like that. Do you have anything to add?
Just the oral history archives.
Oh, yeah. We have
An additional layer where we hope to take this project is by comparing the literature against oral history archives, so recordings of veterans from different eras. Again, you'll have a bit of a distance. The time that they record their memories is not the time that they're experiencing it.
So maybe different from most of the audience members here, both of us are pretty new to digital humanities because we are coming from linguistics and literature. So this is our first project, and we realized how much we have to do actually to produce something more reasonable and more meaningful. So the oral history, we collected oral history data from World War I. So that may be a little better actually but the data size, according to you, okay, the big data, our big data is not really big data. So still, it's really tiny based on your definition. Right? So I don't know how much we can produce more exact, okay, preferable or reasonable outcome based on the either. So we are considering your comment and your suggestions and those things still. Okay. We are aware of that. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, this concludes session 1, Big Data in Society and Culture. Thank you once again to all our speakers and discussants for their thoughtful presentations and engaging discussion, and to everyone here for your attention and participation. Please join me in giving one final round of applause to our presenters and discussants.